Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hope you can see and hear me. It's not required that you have your video camera on, but certainly your audio. I want you to be able to hear what we're doing. We have several with us already. I see Daniela. Hello, Daniela. Open your mic and let me know that you can hear me okay, Daniela. Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Hello, Kenya. Welcome, Kenya. Check your mic. Can you hear all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome. I see Lauren. Hello, Lauren. Welcome, Lauren. Can you hear?
Yes, sir. Hi.
Good. Good. I see Sophia is here. Hello, Sophia. Can you hear me? Let's move on to Clint. Hey, Clint, can you hear me okay? How about Mason? Hey, Mason, can you hear?
Yes, sir.
How about Raquel? Raquel, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Welcome, everybody. How about Anaya? Hello, Anaya.
Hello, I can hear you.
Good. Welcome, welcome. How about Lauren? Hello, Lauren.
Hi, I can hear you.
Good. I see Zippy. Now we're learning something tonight. Who be Zippy?
Hello.
Is that Zipporah?
Yes.
Welcome, Zipporah. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
And Bella. Hello, Bella.
Hi.
And I thought I saw Vonda a moment ago. Hello, Vonda.
Hi.
And I see Samsung SM2926U. We'll call you Sam for short. Hello, Sam.
Carlito.
Hi, Carlino. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir.
Good to have you with us tonight. Glad you're here.
Yes, sir.
Here comes Jackie. Welcome, Jackie. Can you hear me okay? Back to Clint. Can you hear me okay, Clint?
What is happening?
I see Emily Harding. Hello, Emily. And Derek. Was that you, Emily? Hello. Just everybody be sure to check your audio. Your video is not required. I don't necessarily need to see you, but I do want you to be able to hear what we're doing this evening. I am recording for those who cannot be with us tonight for good reasons. So if you choose to keep your video off, that's even more security for you if you would prefer not to be on screen. If you're comfortable with that, I would appreciate seeing you. I saw a few of you already, but I'm welcoming you. Thank you for your flexibility. Who knew that this would be the winter that we would have not one, but two snow events? A couple of weeks ago, we had to miss, well, week two, rather, we had to miss because of snow. And now here we are in 6. And of course, I apologize for not being able to convene with us last week for my own sake because of sickness, but I understood that we had several others, or at least a few, that were dealing with sickness as well. So, yeah, we're just a little disrupted in our in-person meetings. So thank you for your flexibility in that respect. I have opened the comments section on the side if you would like to say hello or if you have any issues with anything. Yes, thank you for asking, Sophia. Is everyone feeling better? I am, although we have had a flu at our house. I thought maybe I had a cold, but now that I have two other family members fully diagnosed with flu, I wonder if that's what I had as well. I hope others are faring better. Thank you for thinking of us, Sophia. Well, let's go ahead and get started here with a prayer. And then I want to share my screen with you for tonight's material together that we would have presented in the first half of our class if we were in person. We're not going to go 2 hours tonight. I don't even know that we're going to go a full hour, just simply due to the fact that what we would do on a Wednesday night together is much different than what we would do when we are online. And I just don't expect anybody to stay here for 2 full hours. That's not fair. I do want to highlight some things that are coming up here in week 7 on the 6th commandment, you shall not murder, and the moral implications of that command, as well as some deeper spiritual issues that are behind homicidal thoughts and actions that Jesus gets to in the Sermon on the Mount and a few other places in the New Testament, dealing with anger, rage, hatred, and those kinds of things. These would be connected to our final week in week 8, our final capstone essay, where you're going to be making a couple of choices when it comes to the final option for that paper. So I do want to get into all of that. I'm hoping to stream a video here by Dennis Prager from Prager University. I hope it works out okay. If not, you should still hear the audio from it, even if the video is a bit spotty as I share the screen. But right now, let's get started with a prayer. Here we go. Ready? Father, we thank you for the technology that keeps us connected. We're grateful for those that can make it tonight. We miss those that cannot be here. We ask that you bless everyone with good safety as well as good health right now, particularly with the rampant flu bug and RSV and other viruses that are causing so much trouble right now. We just pray that people can be well and safe and not spreaders and can get through the rest of the winter. Keep people safe in the snow over the next day or two as well. Father, bless us in our conversations. Help us to learn that which you would help us to learn and apply it in ways that will make us better people for you and better influencers of those around us in culture, particularly those in our circle of influence. Thank you so much for the work of Christ on our behalf. In his name we pray. Amen. Now, let me go ahead and share my screen here very quickly. I want to hop right into what we are doing. Let me get my slides up here. Here we go. Can everybody see my slides? It should take just a moment to transfer for you.
I see them.
Okay,
Me too.
good.
Yes,
All
sir.
right,
Same here.
very good. Thank you. Glad for that confirmation. If anybody can't see my slides, just kind of check your settings there. You should be able to see my screen because I've shared it with everyone. I want to move on to this next slide. This is a passage from Proverbs that I think is really chock full of moral implications for the people that we become. And let's just read it together. The wise person in Proverbs 6, beginning in verse 16, says, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him." Now, we've talked about this literary device before in the Old Testament. I remember mentioning it a couple of classes back, where the writers use a tool for emphasis. It's not as though they meant to say, oh, no, I meant 7, not 6. No, it's kind of underscoring just how blatant these particular matters are or how they want to call attention to them. So listen as we read them. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Wow. We've probably met, know, and have had negative encounters with all 7 of these at some point in our lives. But I want you to underscore verse 17, the part C at the end: hands that shed innocent blood, And I want you to underscore verse 19, the last part, a person who stirs up conflict in the community. God is vitally concerned about the sanctity of life. And that's what we want to address in this specific session tonight, looking at the sixth command. Are you able to see my slides transferring okay? Moving from one to another. This
Yes,
one
sir.
says
Yes, sir.
you shall not murder, Exodus 20:13. Very good. I've left some links. I'm going to post these slides like I do. I hear some folks coming in. Welcome to everybody that's making their way in. I'm not going to look at each of these links, but what these links lead to are data reports on the rather shocking level of homicidal behavior that occurs in our culture daily. One of the short videos has to do with the very graphic and troubling rise of what's now known as mass shootings, mass murder shootings in our culture. Look at those stats on your own at some point, just to be refreshed on just the reality of why a discussion like this is necessary and vital, and why God would be so vitally concerned about this negative duty. We shall not commit murder. Let's just talk here for a few moments. Like to get your thoughts. Won't be able to exhaust these questions, but I'd like to hear your input here. Anybody who would like to speak up, just feel free to do so. In your opinion, why is current U.S. culture so violent and homicidal? What are some of the contributing factors that you've been observing? Any thoughts about that, anyone? Why are we as homicidal as we are right now? Anybody care to venture an opinion or an observation?
Looks like Zippy has her hand up.
Zippy, go ahead. Thank you, Zipporah.
I would, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I would say it's because America as a nation has abandoned the value of life and how God made it in His own image, and when we abandon how life is valuable, and when we teach people that we're all just kind of atoms in expense of an accident, people lose that, and they kind of like disregard what life how valuable life is.
What a great observation. Would folks agree with that? That when we begin to devalue life itself, it's not very far and long to devaluing the people around us to the degree that whatever negative context would develop, that we can take life so easily and wantonly. I think you make such a sad reality observation, but accurate nonetheless, Zipporah. Yes, yes. Any other observations? Any other thoughts folks would like to share?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
It's I just had a conversation with my nephew earlier today, and it's funny that it just so happened to coincide with the topic that we're discussing. He is 30 years old, and he was just recently diagnosed with MS.
Oh,
And it has hindered his abilities greatly. He went from a vibrant young man to pretty much almost losing his sight.
oh,
He
oh.
is walking on a cane because his mobility and everything has been greatly hindered.
Mhm,
Um, and he is no longer able to sustain on his own. He has to have somebody around him.
mhm.
And he revealed to me today that at one point he had contemplated taking his life.
Oh, yeah.
And so at that point, I told him, I said, you know, it's hard when we wrap whom we are around the tangible things like money and our identity, when our identity should be wrapped in our relationship with Christ.
Oh, yeah,
And knowing
yeah.
that he is the one who sustained us. I say, but even more so, we need to come to a realization that we do not have the right to take something that we can't give. Jesus gave life to us that we might be in relationship with him. And we
Yeah,
don't have the authority to take that, even if it is our own. And
yeah,
that and considering that you can't give you can't you can't I'm searching for what my heart is
you
trying to
just
make right.
take your time. This is pretty heavy subject
It,
matter. Take your time.
it was very heavy for me because it was the last thing that I would have expected to come from him, being that
Yeah,
he grew up in the church, we
yeah,
were all raised in the church. And so having that respect for God as our authority, and knowing that I would have hoped that when he was at his lowest, he would have found that his strength comes from God, that he's made perfect in his weakness through his faith and his belief and his walk. And
yeah,
so having that conversation at that moment was eye-opening, because we don't come to realize, just as Zippy said, that um, you know, how fragile people's understanding is and value of life is. At
yeah,
any moment, they just have a moment of weakness. They just feel as though they're not important, or they're not a part of anything worth living for, and they
yeah.
make a rash decision to end it all.
Yes. And we're going to be praying for this person. We certainly will. And I know you're going to continue to give good counsel. And I know that it's very heavy on your heart. But you raise another very important moral issue, but also not even a moral issue, just a very profound mental health issue for people who find themselves in circumstances, like you've said, that they never expected to find, a devastating medical diagnosis, and just being so overwhelmed with that reality that one would consider that the taking of one's life or the ending of life would be preferred. It's often not a very rational decision, although those in mental health know that there does come a point where if someone has determined that they are going to self-harm or take their life, there does come to be a certain resolute mindset that is um, involved in that, but it's not a rational decision because of the emotion that's involved. And we would hope that someone in such a position would reach out for help.
Yeah.
But you highlight another vital aspect of the loss of life in our culture, with particularly mental health issues being as they are now. And one of the things that we're going to be reading about, if we've not already started to read this week, is this moral aspect of self harm, or suicide, or more specifically, physician assisted suicide, as we might be reading about just a bit. But it's not just something that we discuss in a vacuum, is it? It's real, it's people we know and love, it's profound, it's pervasive in our culture, and so many societal and personal matters contribute to it, but it's a reality that
Yeah.
brings us back to why God would want us to value human life, those of others, and particularly our own, that we would not come to such a desperate place. Very good. Thank you. Tell me, this is your relative. That's right.
My nephew.
Your nephew. Yes. Well, we're going to be praying for your nephew, and we'll keep that certainly in confidence at this point. But let's all be keeping this person in mind in our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you.
Let's move on here. What should the response of the Christian community be to this dramatic rise? Let's return to the weapon involved death, homicide. Is this merely a Second Amendment or gun control issue? Um, what do you think? What should the Christian response to this be? Any thoughts, any observations, or opinions that you might like to share? Certainly, we value human life, right? And
Definitely.
what we're working to counterbalance with that value of human life are Second Amendment rights that we have in our culture. But if we had a third hand, we would put on that the tremendous out of control challenge that culture is having, law enforcement in particular, with uh, weapons that can do such harm so quickly in the hands of such wrongly guided individuals. And so it becomes very complex. It's not something that is just settled with legislation. It's not something that's just settled at the legal law enforcement or even the court level. It goes far deeper, doesn't it? There are societal matters here, maybe things that deal with family issues, things that deal with employment, race, tensions and discrimination, and just a variety of factors go into what we're experiencing right now. And I guess maybe one of the things that I've learned to be more humble about, and the Lord's kind of brought me to that place of humility, is that um, there are so many aspects to this particular issue in our culture that we as Christians in particular need to make sure that we're coming at it from a standpoint of compassion, a standpoint of listening more than we speak so that we can understand more clearly the perspective of others, that we emphasize our role and place as people who bring peace and who make peace and who model peace before those around us, so that issues of homicidal anger or rage that occur can be mitigated. There's so much involved in this that makes it very, very complex, which again is why this moral issue is so real time, so contemporary. Any other thoughts on this aspect of our discussion here before we move on?
Gun control is always a tough one, I think. Um, because here again, you have moral law and civil law fighting against each other.
Yeah, good observation.
And
Yeah,
competing for authority, which we already know moral law supersedes any of them. However, when you have that juxtaposition with moral law and civil law competing, how do we rationalize? Because the argument always becomes it's not the weapon, it's the person.
yeah,
And so how do we rationalize controlling or finding some type of way to control the person so that they have a better understanding as to how to handle the particular weapon, I guess you'd say, the gun, so that we aren't finding ourselves in these positions so often.
yeah,
The all of the laws and things that they put in place, they still don't seem to be controlling the issue of people getting access to the weapons. And so finding some type of way or so that we can lessen access to the weapons. And
yeah,
it is not working in its
No.
current state with the laws and regulations that they have in place.
Thank you so much. I want to go back and pull that thread that you were mentioning there a while ago about the connection between moral law and civil law. And let me just open the mic here to someone else on this as well. Um, you know, do we find ourselves in a place where, because of the constitutional rights that are guaranteed, that the flow of weapons and the access, therefore, into our culture have so overtaken likely what the original framers of the Constitution were intending by that freedom to bear arms for the purposes that they had at that time, that we really need to revisit uh, our approach to legalized possession of weapons and how we go about that at the same time that we're addressing other aspects of the issue, such as mental health issues, such as, like I mentioned earlier, racial tensions, disparity social economically, um, home lives that have gotten so disrupted and so forth that people find themselves much more on the edge of violence than they ever would have thought themselves to be. It's much more complex than just one or two facets, isn't it? Anybody else have any thoughts that you'd like to share? Any um, maybe even a nudge or a pushback on the direction that's this conversation going? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to kind of put in my 2 cents.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the like the gun control could be I mean, just better enforced, I think. I think a lot of these like the policies and stuff like that are in place. I think there's cracks that are being slipped through,
Yeah.
and it's causing a lot of kind of controversy and stuff like that when we do have laws that should be better enforced. Right,
Yeah.
they are already in place.
Yeah.
But also, I think that that the gun control, the Second Amendment, has been the sort of scapegoat for the issue at hand. Because a lot of the times in these mass shootings or different tragedies, these individuals, um, there were clear warning signs by those within the community
Yeah.
that weren't properly addressed, as far as mental health and everything goes.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point, and how tragic it is for us to have an after the fact profile, if I can use
Mhm.
that term, of the assailant, to find then that there were telltale signs, that there were issues here. And of course, therefore, the mental health aspects certainly need to be a part of the conversation. Like you're pointing out, the better enforcement of laws that already exist and so forth. It's just very complex. And I guess maybe the goal of my conversation with us here is to point out that reality. It's not nearly as black and white or left or right, if I can put it that way, as sometimes it comes across. And I think we're all acknowledging that. I think the role that we are called to play as people of salt and light, people who God is intending to use as transformational influences in our culture, puts us in a position where the um, I guess the transcendent view of the sanctity of life is something that we're in a position to teach more, to practice more, to model more. And that's why delving deeper and getting behind what is motivating the homicidal behavior becomes far more important, particularly in a Christian context, right? And not merely in a Christian context, as important as that is, but in a holistic health and well being context. When we know better who we are as human beings and we're treating each other with the due value, sanctity that we should because of our inherent value as human beings, that can start to make a difference, maybe as small as just our own circle of influence, but still it can ripple out and make a difference. It's just why it's so important, I think, for us to have conversations like these. I know there are probably some other thoughts. If we were together in class, I would see some other hands popping up. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Anybody wanted to share a final thought before we move on?
I do.
I-
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Go right ahead.
Okay, it looks like there are three of us. By the way, there are little emoji icons next to our names that say we're raising our hands. I don't know if you can see them.
You know, I'm not looking as closely there as I'm conducting our conversation. So just kind of feel free to speak up when you have opportunity. Go right ahead, folks. Thank you for your
Okay.
good conversation.
I think another aspect of this is community, because just thinking about it, I'm thinking about like when there are shootings and when bad things happen where the person clearly had mental health issues. If the community was more involved in each other, and people in the neighborhood got together and said like, hey, I think so and so is having some issues, there are some red flags here, they would be able to, at least in a lot more circumstances than now, maybe be able to mitigate the problem within their own community. But because people are so closed off from each other, we end up feeling the need to use the government more as the tool to control these things from happening than each other, which I think kind of undermines the whole point of the Second Amendment, which we have to protect us from the government. So I think that whenever we can, we should try to fix problems without the government having to get involved. So my hope is that there would be a way to reduce gun violence dramatically without the government having to meddle with our rights, beyond making sure that people don't have mental illnesses, or aren't already convicted of something before getting a gun. But yeah, I definitely think we could help each other more.
What a great observation. Community-based support, networking, services, hands-on awareness of how people are doing can make a huge, huge difference. And isn't it ironic that it kind of reinforces an inward turned culture when we have such outbreaks of violence that we have to protect ourselves? And part of protection is isolation, right? And so we're not connected, therefore, to our fellow human beings enough because we're afraid, generally speaking, of course. And then that just reinforces lack of awareness and lack of communication and lack of support. And then, like you say, we become more reliant upon law enforcement, upon governmental agencies, and so forth to legislate and control that which really could be supported much more from a community grassroots based approach. And I think that's where the Christian community has a vital role to play. You know, as we get outside our church walls, as we spend more time getting to know our community, hosting our community, and even as neighbors, just networking more and being available to each other more, we can develop sort of a self-policing nature in a holistic way, hopefully, and we can be much more available to anticipate where there can be some trouble or challenges and kind of mitigate them before they begin, or at least starting to work with other community agencies, mental health agencies, hospitals, law enforcement, and so forth to keep us all safe and well. Such a good thought. Who else? Who else has a thought?
Dr. Mike, it's Carlito.
Hi, Carlito.
Yes, I like to kind of like tie everything in that we've been discussing all the way back to what Melva was speaking on earlier, because I believe a good portion of the problem is the fact that no, we aren't connected and respect the decalogues as much as we should as a society. And like Melva mentioned to her nephew, grew up in the church. Her family grew up in the church, and she thought that he would lean on God, Jesus more in down times. And I myself grew up in the church like all my life, like church all day Sunday, church throughout the week. And it's really, honestly, I'm blessed and I'm glad to be taking this course because it's opened up even more and enlightened me even more. And I've gotten deeper into my relationship with God because I'm learning more and I understand more. And you would think that somebody that went to church all their life would be more in tuned and what's the word I'm looking for? Just fall and know. But like I've learned more in these 5 or 6 weeks here than I have the last, I mean, okay, before I switched churches, but like my entire young adulthood in church. So it's us as a church body, individuals collectively understanding and knowing and getting deeper. And then I can say the church that I'm attending now, they do more for the community, and there are more ministries that are out there to help and support and allow individuals like myself to get involved and get a better and deeper understanding and knowledge. And therefore, now we can start making better moral decisions, ethical decisions. And I believe that ties into um, people, individuals out there doing mass killings or committing
Yeah.
suicides or just taking life unnecessarily because um, they don't cherish their own or other individual lives.
Yeah, what a great statement. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing your positive experience with our course. That does my heart good. And I would also observe, Carlito and others, that one of the challenges that I think the local church has is to make a relevant connection to ancient teaching of Scripture in a way that it makes a difference for everyday life. And so, if you're blessed to have a pastor or you're in a church community where someone is saying, now here's what God says, and here's what it means in our everyday walking around lives, this is the difference it's going to make if we live God's way. This is what's going to happen to humanity and our community if we don't live God's way in real time, practical ways. I think we do tend to lose sight of how these ancient teachings become so vital for our own time. And so, this concept of community, and if I could come back around to how we've talked about justice so many times already in our course, these become relevant issues that have real practical power to make a difference for where we are. So I'm grateful to hear that you're in a church community that's connecting with its neighborhood, that's identifying real human need and trying to meet it in practical ways, to build relationships, to get to know each other, and to help people feel safe with us as a community of faith. Because there are many times that people find themselves in circumstances that they never expected when they're committing homicide or they're considering taking their own life or some form of self harm. And when they feel like there's no one to turn to, or there's no hope, or there's no alternative, that only reinforces and underscores the negative behavior that's already being considered or undertaken. So thank you so much for that. I'm glad that's what you're gaining from our course. Melva, do you still have your hand up? Do you have another comment, or does
I
somebody else have a comment?
I was going to echo what Carlito was saying, it goes back to our lesson on love thy neighbor.
Yes.
And exactly what I believe Vonda was saying about us being siloed off, pretty much protecting our own self and preserving our own way of life. Jesus, he went out into the highways and about paraphrasing in today's
Yeah.
terms,
Go
but
ahead.
he didn't stay within his own community
No.
or within his own family. He went out into the hedges and highways and he reached people regardless of who they were. And it's so much so like we conduct our lives, and even the churches have come to now, even to the point where if somebody came in off the street and they didn't look a certain way or dress a certain way, they'd almost as much as turn them away and send them off instead of
Yeah.
seeing their need and
Yeah.
their duty to this person, to address them in their need. And
Yeah.
so just being able to actually understand who we are in Christ and what our duties are to others is to love our neighbor as we would ourselves, and to be that present help in the time of need, regardless to what it is and who it is, would
Yeah.
go a long way. One of the things that I'm blessed, much as Carlito said, was one of the things I was sharing with my nephew is I've learned more in this course, and I've come to understand how much I did not know
Oh, me
about
too.
the Bible, and how much more growth I need to understanding exactly what the practical applications are for my life and what is expected of me as I go out. One of the things that I've often told people is, unfortunately, even though most of us don't want to be ministers, just by virtue of being called a Christian, we are a minister
Yeah.
because
We're
we are
called to
probably
serve.
the only Bible that most people will see. And
Yeah.
so how we conduct ourselves and how we interact with these people, it makes a difference. And so being able to have a word, offer a prayer, um, live our lives in a way that would allow them to come to us and say, well, what is it about you that sets you apart? Why are you different? And giving us that opportunity to share our testimony goes a long way. And it may be just that one thing that somebody needs to turn them away from doing something that they would probably regret for the rest of their lives.
What a great statement. And from everyone, thank you so very much. And I think it's just underscoring again why we need reminded of God's vision for the kingdom, for the church, for us as individual ministers, like Mel was pointing out, as well as a community, to make a transformational difference in our culture. Well, let's move on from here. Just great stuff. I appreciate it so much. I want to get into some nuancing or parsing of some terms in the Old Testament concerning this negative duty: do not murder, you shall not murder. You should see on your screen a slide with a blue background that's talking about the Hebrew word rasach. Rasak. Um, the definition is this: it could refer to killing that was inherently evil, or the context of the use of this word implies premeditation and intentionality. I think one of the things that's important to learn, even in civil law, from the nation of Israel and the Decalogue, is that God recognized the difference between accidental death, unintentional taking of life, and the premeditated taking of particularly innocent life. And I think that's why it's important for us to distinguish terms here just a little bit. Philip Ryken uh, reminds us that the Hebrew word rasach refers to, quote, the unjust taking of a legally innocent life. I like this statement by Brian Tallman. He says, murder is not merely the taking of someone's life, but the taking of someone's life unjustly. It all comes back to justice, doesn't it? This, of course, he says means that not all killing is forbidden. There are such cases as self-defense, just war, capital punishment, and others when taking a life is not permitted but required. Now, we could have an entire course. In fact, Regent offers a course that goes more deeply into each of these forms of the taking of human life and justified or unjustified and so forth. But the point that we're making here is the Old Testament civil law of Moses made a distinction between the terrible, tragic loss of a life accidentally or unintentionally from that of life that was taken premeditatedly, and particularly innocent life that was taken premeditatedly. And that's what we're referring to, or what's being spoken directly to in the sixth command, you shall not murder. It has to do with the prohibition of taking innocent life in a premeditated manner. Now, all loss of life is tragic. And of course, in the Old Testament law of Moses, the civil law had certain outcomes and responses to accidental death or unintentional homicide. But what's being referred to in the sixth command is the intentional, premeditated taking of innocent life. I'm looking here just briefly at the nuances from a legal perspective, even in our own culture. Homicide is the killing of one person by another. It's a broad term that includes both legal and illegal killings. Murder, notice the difference, is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. That involves willful, deliberate, malicious, and premeditated killing. Manslaughter is a different form of taking of human life, and it involves two different components. One is voluntary, which is the intentional killing of another person in the heat of passion. In other words, things just got out of control. I read tragically this week, maybe you did as well, of a fiance, a woman engaged to be married, who took the life of her fiance, her husband to be, killing him by shooting him because they got into an argument, a heated argument, obviously, about a venue location for their wedding reception. Now, how ironic and tragic is that, right?
Yeah.
But that's what's being discussed here in what's known as voluntary manslaughter. It was an intentional taking of another person's life, but it was in the heat of passion and in response to adequate provocation. Involuntary manslaughter is the negligence that's causing the death of another person. This would be something like death due to drunk driving, for example, right? So I want to try to play this video for us. I'm hoping it will stream. So I'm going to stop this share of my slides so I can go get this video for us to watch. And
Really,
hopefully it will play for us.
really quickly, you had a question in the comments. Somebody
Yes,
was
I'm sorry,
asking,
I missed it. Go ahead. What's your question? While I get this set up. Go ahead.
somebody was asking, what does Riken mean by legally innocent?
Good question. Anybody want to venture a thought, having read what Riken stated? Someone who is legally innocent, what that phrase might mean? I'll follow it up if somebody would like to share a think so.
Um, I haven't completed the readings yet, but I was assuming that it's someone who hasn't been kind of ruled as guilty of doing something that would justify like punishment by the law, like say capital punishment. So someone who is proven innocent or just hasn't done anything wrong. And so there wasn't a reason to like legally kill them, I guess.
Yeah, the person that is being classified as uh, legally innocent is the victim in this situation, right? they're the one that was perpetrated against. So once again, it's going back to this concept of the innocent life being taken. You know, unfortunately, there are lives that are taken in the process of crime being committed in which both parties are guilty at something or at some point. What we're talking about here is the taking premeditatedly of innocent life. There was
So
not, go
would a
ahead.
good example be a situation where a mom committed suicide, but in the process of committing suicide, she killed her 3 kids. The 3 kids would be innocent lives.
What a tragic, but I think accurate example of what we're talking about. Yeah, yeah, good point. Good point. Hopefully that answers that question. Good question. Thank you.
I have a question. What about like regarding the unborn? Because in some states, like you can legally take their lives. So
Yeah,
what would that exactly be classified as under the law?
yeah. We're currently going through a dramatic shift in our nation right now, right? Particularly since Roe v. Wade was overturned 2 years ago. Now everything's reverting to state law, and states vary from state to state. And so now, what would be considered the taking of the life of a preborn would be considered a capital offense, and laws are starting to be put in place. I don't know if any have actually been pursued yet, but then in other states, that's not the case because of how life is defined prior to a live birth. And so it's varying. What we're going to get into in reading this week is that um, this issue goes to the rights of the preborn. And so, for example, we're going to be reading, if you've not already begun to read it, an amicus brief that was filed in behalf of Mother Teresa before the US Supreme Court back in 1994, in which she argued that the framers of the Constitution, in guaranteeing certain unalienable rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights, some of which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, she argued that first Supreme Court and all sitting justices from that point forward had a moral duty to honor and carry out the thinking of the framers who inherently provided protection for the preborn in that statement. So we're kind of working all this out from a legal perspective, but then we're having to deal with it from a moral perspective as well. And so I think each person has to decide based on what we understand God's view of the sanctity of life to be. Um, Everything from passages in the Old Testament, such as God creating for us the teaching of the Psalms that we are human beings from conception, right forward. Um, what we understand and think from a moral perspective, and therefore what we believe abortion consists of. Is it the premeditated taking of innocent life? Many would contend so. Is it scientifically consistent? Is it something that even science needs to be considered in? Um, I don't know that I'm answering your question completely, but these are all of the moral nuances and practical issues that go with abortion, right? Do you have a thought you'd like to share? Hello?
I was actually just replying in the chat. I just think it's interesting because I've had this conversation like with other Christians and my parents. But if a pregnant woman dies and like she's murdered, it's considered a double homicide. And so then the law acknowledges the life of the unborn child. And in regards to like the whether it's first or second degree murder, I think that falls like under the category of homicide, and that's more getting into specifics. But I just think it's interesting because we see the law contradicting itself, and that's just kind of an example of how sin can blind people And if you ask someone who is pro-abortion that question, like, I just wonder how they would respond to
Yeah,
that point, because it's like, well, the law's acknowledging a life here. Like, what do you say to that?
yeah. And I think if nothing else, what that does indicate, Sophia, is the inconsistency of our law codes and how certainly we need to be more consistent, right? If in fact, like you're describing, in this case, the preborn is considered a living human being and therefore capital offenses have been committed against that life, why not in the case of um, an optional abortion, right? Um, and so, one of the things that you're going to wrestle with as you read through our material this week, and maybe not so much wrestle with it, but kind of clarify and settle convictions, are issues having to do with right to life from the beginning, the womb, the right to life for the preborn, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, the right to life that those that would be considering taking their lives through medical means, physician assisted suicide. We're going to be reading about this week and the moral nuances of it and how we feel about it and what we could do to make a difference in helping people understand on both ends of the spectrum the sanctity of life and how to help them protect life for as long as they possibly can. Just tremendous thoughts here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We've got just a few minutes left. I wanted to be done within an hour. Any other thoughts that anybody would like to share before I try to run this video? It's a video by Dennis Prager from Prager University, and he goes a little bit deeper into the distinctions in these the Old Testament words that are used to distinguish premeditated murder from the accidental taking of life or unintentional taking of life, and what difference that makes and how we interpret and apply this command. Hopefully it'll run and you can see the video. If not, you should be able to just hear the audio. Any other thoughts though before we show that?
Yeah, I have a thought about euthanasia, but the only problem is I think it would start a whole conversation, so maybe I won't. I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, let's do then. Let's just hold it so that when we're together in class this coming Wednesday, and hopefully the weather will cooperate, we'll have more opportunity in person to tease this out a bit further, because we would have gone the full session tonight looking at these issues, but we're limiting ourselves to this amount of time just because of the format that we're using here. I just don't feel like it's a valuable thing to go much longer than an hour in a session like that. So what do you think, Bonda? We can wait and pick it up next Wednesday. I'll make a note so that we can.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you. Let me see how I do in running this video. Here we go.
You would think that of all the 10 commandments,
Hold on.
you would think that of all the 10 commandments, the one that needs the least explaining is the sixth, because it seems so clear. It is the one that the King James Bible, the most widely used English translation of the Bible, translates as, "Thou shalt not kill."
Let me stop.
Yet the truth is quite the opposite. This is probably
Let me stop right here and ask, first of all, can everybody hear and see?
Again.
I can
Okay.
see it.
I can
Okay.
see
Yes.
it.
Very
Yes.
good. Let me keep going then.
the least well understood of the 10 commandments. The reason is that the Hebrew original does not say "do not kill," it says "do not murder." Both Hebrew and English have two words for taking a life. One is kill, harag in Hebrew, and the other is murder, ratzach in Hebrew. The difference between the two is enormous. Kill means, one, taking any life, whether of a human being or an animal. Two, taking a human life, deliberately or by accident. Three, taking a human life, legally or illegally, morally or immorally. On the other hand, murder can only mean one thing: the illegal or immoral taking of a human life. That's why we say, I killed a mosquito, not I murdered a mosquito. And that's why we would say the worker was accidentally killed, not the worker was accidentally murdered. So why did the King James translation of the Bible use the word kill rather than murder? Because 400 years ago, when the translation was made, kill was synonymous with murder. As a result, some people don't realize that English has changed since 1610, and therefore think that the Ten Commandments prohibits all killing. But of course it doesn't. If the Ten Commandments forbade killing, we would all have to be vegetarians. Killing animals would be prohibited. And we would all have to be pacifists, since we could not kill even in self-defense. However, you don't have to know how the English language has evolved in order to understand that the Ten Commandments could not have prohibited all killing. The very same part of the Bible that contains the Ten Commandments, the 5 books of Moses, the Torah as it is known by Jews, commands the death penalty for murder, allows killing in war, prescribes animal sacrifice, and allows eating meat. A correct understanding of the commandment against murder is crucial, because while virtually every modern translation correctly translates the commandment as do not murder, many people cite the King James translation to justify 2 positions that have no biblical basis: opposition to capital punishment and pacifism. Regarding capital punishment and the Bible, the only law that appears in each one of the 5 books of Moses is that murderers be put to death. Opponents of the death penalty are free to hold the view that all murderers should be allowed to live, but they are not free to cite the Bible to support their view. Yet many do, and they always cite the commandment, do not kill. But that, as should now be abundantly clear, is not what the commandment says, and it is therefore an invalid argument. As regards pacifism, the belief that it is always wrong to kill a human being, again, anyone is free to hold this position, as immoral as it may be, and what other word than immoral can one use to describe forbidding the killing of someone who was in the process of murdering innocent men, women, and children in, let's say, a movie theater or a school? But it is dishonest to cite the commandment against murder to justify pacifism. There is moral killing, most obviously when done in self-defense against an aggressor, and there is immoral killing. And the word for that is murder. The 10 Commandments are portrayed on 2 tablets. The 5 commandments on the 2nd tablet all concern our treatment of fellow human beings. The first one on that list is do not murder. Why? Because murder is the worst act a person can commit. The other 4 commandments prohibiting stealing, adultery, giving false testimony, and coveting are all serious offenses. But murder leads the list, because deliberately taking the life of an innocent person is the most terrible thing we can do. The next time you hear someone cite do not kill when quoting the 6th commandment, gently but firmly explain that it actually says do not murder. I'm Dennis Prager. Join Prager University.
All right. Share your thoughts. How does this help make a distinction here between the terms in the Old Testament and particularly the use of the word kill versus murder? How does that help us sort out what we're looking at here? Or does it at all? Does it make any difference? What do you think?
Yes, it does make difference, and I would like to get the that link, because I was just explaining this to a friend of mine the other day,
Sure.
and it's coincidentally like that you had that video, and I'm not sure. I think I explained it to him. I explained it to him the same way because we've read it. It's in a reading somewhere. It's in one of our readings.
Yeah,
What he,
Lycan
yeah.
reads it this way, yes.
So, but I would love to send him that video.
I will send all of the slides that we're using tonight, and the clip link will be right on the slide that you're looking right looking at right now, Carlito, okay?
Okay.
Good, good. Any other thoughts or observations? We're going to wrap up with this tonight. I just wanted to get your thinking about this distinction and what difference it makes, if any, and how it helps clarify what the sixth commandment is actually about. Any thoughts, any observations?
I just want to say that it really emphasizes how the sixth commandment is about justice and how we have a just God who is not trying to be unreasonable and say, oh, you can't protect yourselves or you can't, take the life of someone that is taking the lives of other people as a consequence to set a standard. So I think that's really important because this is definitely something that, like, in the past, I would have been unsure about, but now understanding the wording and just considering situations like God is, he's a God of justice and there are consequences for our actions. And so sometimes this could be a consequence if someone does something really terrible.
Yeah, yeah. I think the clarification is helpful in that respect, Sophia, because we can take positions morally and then seek biblical support for them and not be accurate in our understanding of Scripture. Now, would we all agree that the taking of any life in the eyes of God would be tragic? And yet, that's as a result of fallen humanity being in a position that, if we stop to consider it, the first crime, the first sin that was acted upon was in fact murder, where Cain took his brother's life in whatever envious anger or um, jealousy that he developed toward him. God places such a premium on human life that any time a life is taken, it's going to grieve his heart. And yet, Sophia makes such an important point also about God being just and not expecting extreme passivity on our part, that to protect our own lives, we would not try to stop someone who's working to take that life or to protect other lives. We feel like God would say, no, you can't stop a murderer, right? And I think this all plays into the beginning of life and the end of life issues that we're going to be addressing, particularly when we write our week 8 essay, because there are a variety of ways that we as citizens, that we as human beings, that we as Christians in a church community can respond proactively to the tragic taking of life that we want to consider and the difference that we can make in culture by doing so. So thank you for that very important underscored concept of justice, God being merciful and just. Very good. Anybody else? Any other observations about Dennis Prager's video before we wrap it up and say goodnight?
I just
Yeah.
have
Did that person want to go first?
no, I just have a question. I wanted to know if we could get the slides.
Oh, yes, I will be sending the slides by morning and I'll post them in the modules area like I've been doing each week after class. So you'll be able to find all of my notes there, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, who has had a good question coming there or a comment?
Oh, that was me, Anaya.
Okay, Anaya, go ahead.
I just have a comment on that. I just gotta say that video, it kind of reminded us of our week 3 dialogue assignment, like how it like suggested in Perfect Duties how that woman was in the court saying that they had to take the life away. And when it like said, and when I like wrote the assignment down, I remember mentioning that when justically, when it's more about following the rules, but it's more about like living righteous and like showing compassion in like
Yeah,
God's way and like protecting the vulnerable. So like it's like a medical procedure, but it's like at the same time it's just mind blowing how like God can lead like such a prevail, because I remember in the Bible says we must obey God rather than human beings. So I just think that like moved me and just like reminded me in like such a way.
good. Yeah, I think there was a connection. There is a connection to that week 3 dialogue. You know, the decision to be compassionate, the decision to administer justice was a part of the lower court's ruling. And the appellate court obviously thought differently and overruled her ruling to abort the child. And so I hope that what we're seeing here is like was being pointed out by Sophia, that we have a God who is broader than the human aspect and the mind that we have that can only at times focus on one particular portion of this moral issue. God is perfect in his thinking, he's perfect in his righteousness, he's perfect in his justice. And so he's the one who can legislate or rule or guide or mandate. And certainly he's the only one that can truly know the heart of a human being, dealing with all of the facets of this, either the perpetrator or the victim, right? And that's good for us to have and good for us to know. Hey, you all have done great tonight. We're all about 10 minutes past 8. I'm going to let us go for the evening. I'm going to send the slides that we used tonight. We'll pick it up next Wednesday. We do have a readings quiz that covers weeks 5 and 6. That's due by this coming Sunday. If you get a chance to get out and play in the snow, if you want to play in the snow, be safe and well. And I hope everybody stays well and healthy. And I look forward to seeing everybody next Wednesday night. Sound good?
Yes,
sir.
thank you.
Any-
Yes.
Anything else
thank
anyone
you.
else would like to ask about, talk about? You can linger if you like. I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. But if you have a question, I'll stay nearby, okay? Well, good night. God bless. And we'll see you in a few days. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Professor.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.